And welcome back. Continuing on the Marvel Netflix review train, we are talking about Daredevil Season 3. The final season, unfortunately, of Daredevil, just because that's when the series that's when the Netflix Marvel couldn't, reach agreements and deals and all that whatnot. And decided instead of just, working things out like children or like adults, they'd act like children and decided to just cancel the series. Now, look, that's Netflix's priority. That's their prerogative. I know, I get that. Still sucks because season 3 of Daredevil was awesome. I still contend, and I mentioned this in my Punisher review, that Punisher and Daredevil were the two best things that came out of the Netflix Marvel series. Any of them. Bar none, hands down, they were the two best series of the characters they did. Daredevil's, now I'll say this before going into anything specific. In terms of how I rank them, I do think season 2 is the best season. But that said, I mean, none of the seasons are terrible at all. Like, they're all freaking awesome. But I would say season 2, I think, is the best season. And then it's really a toss-up, depending on how you prefer season 1 to season 3. I will say that, just going with my instinct, and it's been a little while since I finished season 3. Having time to marinate on it a little bit, though I haven't thought about this question very much, which was better. I think I like season 1 just a little better because it's a bit more simplistic and it's really showing out the roots of Daredevil. But again, season 3 is nothing short of fantastic. It really is. I mean, what's the story? Obviously, Matt survives the incident with the Defenders, the building falling on him, but he's now questioning himself, questioning his faith, questioning his role in the city, and it's him stripping down to the basics and trying to see if he can still do this and if he can bring down Fisk, who has now gotten out of jail and is on house arrest, or so it seems. Truth be told, he's manipulating the whole scheme entirely. And what's going on in that what's going on with this back and forth. All the while we get introduced to Agent Nadeem, who is basically the handler for Fisk. Poindexter, aka Bullseye, is introduced as well. And it is, look, the way this series is done, the way they tackle issues, crisis of faith, crisis of belief, who you are, can you still do what you did, and what happens when the system fails? Can you still trust the system? They're tackling so many questions in it. First of all, the core, again, Daredevil has probably the best choreography of any of the Netflix series in terms of fights. Like they still get brutal. Punisher, I think, one-ups Daredevil in terms of sheer brutality of what we're seeing, but in terms of like straight actual choreography and fight, no, Daredevil still beats Punisher out, and it still shows in this when we get the 3 different fights between Daredevil and Bullseye. All of them are fantastic. What I heard someone ask about a long time ago was. Talked about how Matt was lost to Bullseye nearly every time. But when you look at those 3 fights that happened in the season, the first time, that's his first meeting with Bullseye. He wasn't prepared for that. And I remember someone pointing out that whenever the fight got into close range, Matt had the edge. Whenever the fight went at distance, Bullseye had the edge. And then he lost that first fight. But then the second fight came in the church, and I'm going to be flat out honest with you. I think Matt won that fight. The only reason you can make the argument he lost that fight is because he got distracted by Karen and the other people there. But granted, the only reason he was there is because Dex had showed up, and the other people were there and in danger. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have shown up. But that being said, he, assuming that fight had taken place without anyone else there, no, Matt I think actually won that fight. And then you get into the 3-way fight between him, Fisk, and Dex. Ultimately, Matt's the one who comes out on top, and that's mostly because Dex was focusing actually more on Fisk than he was on Matt. So, and then Fisk breaks his back. Oh God, that was brutal. Matt also is never at one. I see a little bit of parallels to this, and to some degree Punisher season 2. Although I give Frank a bit more edge in this category than Matt does. Neither of these guys are at their best throughout a lot of the season. Punisher is usually recovered mostly throughout season 2, but there's points where he's not, and he's still fighting. Whereas Matt is never at 100% in the season at all. Like, he's still recovering. And we see that throughout like the first 2 episodes, where like he's trying to get his senses back, and at one point the nun, who, spoiler, it's revealed to be his mother. And see, I actually knew a lot of the spoilers going in. I just didn't know how it all played out. I knew that was his mother. I was just wondering when they were going to reveal it. And when she hands him the hot pie, all he says is he can taste blood and ash. And then he goes to the sink at one point, and he funnels the water through those, and he coughs up that giant, almost like loogie of blood. Clearly, there's just a big packet of blood just in there clogging up his sinuses. So now he was partially gained some of his edge back. And then finally, his full hearing came back as he was doing that test, and only to be hear that Fisk got out. There's a lot of parallels with whether or not God has something to do with this, because Daredevil's religious background plays a lot into his character, and he even comes out and blames God a lot, and it's intense to watch in many points, especially when we see how some of these characters end up. The father, the priest he knew since the first season, get that when he gets it right in the chest. I'm like, oh crap, because I'm wondering, like, okay, how many of these characters are actually making it out alive? And the minute we got into that scene in the church, I had that feeling like someone's not making it. And then okay. Now I knew it wasn't going to be Karen, because I knew she showed up in Punisher season 2. But when I'm like realizing, oh crap, the father, and sure enough, the father got it. Yep. I also found that even though he's an original character, the Agent Nadeem was a very sympathetic, compelling character in many ways. You hate the fact that, you feel great that he's able to finally get something on someone, get a moment to try and help people out. But then when it's found out it's just all been manipulation by Fisk, it really hurts when you see this guy who's just been trying to do the right thing, be a good person, be a good role model for his wife and son. Where it all ends up is just tragic. But again, he ultimately does get, I guess you could say he gets the last line. He does it shows that he is a good man, and he goes out on his own terms. I respect anyone who can do that. Kind of like when Defoe did that in John Wick, where it's like, you go out on my terms. No, I go out on mine. He steals the guy's gun, and boom, I told you. Well played. I was like, yeah, you really do sympathize with that character. Another great, the way they introduced Dex to show that, yeah, this kid was a legitimate psychotic. And he had no empathy for human life whatsoever, life at any kind whatsoever, and yet it actually shows you how, because me and my girlfriend actually looked up the difference between psychopath and sociopath at one point. Sociopaths are actually the ones who actually have much more difficulty fitting with society. They're actually much more prone to violence, easily agitated, all that, tend to live outside society. Psychopaths are the ones who can blend in far more effectively and actually lead relatively normal lives. But they just don't feel empathy. They don't have any sort of moral compass about right or wrong in them. They just do what they do. And yeah, I'm like, that's the more they keep going into Dex, I'm like, the more effed up it gets. When the girl, and I can't remember her name, that he was stalking, actually gives them a chance. And again, this is one of those things where I kind of remembered what happened. Then I see the footage of Fisk just having a shot right there. And then he brings her frozen corpse into Fisk's way. I'm like, Jesus. Oh, man. The action sequences, they really do a great job at, showing off what Dex can do. They never, though, really indicate how he had... is he a metahuman? Because metahumans exist in this world. We know they do. Because even though it's technically connected to the MCU, it's not. But even outside of the MCU, we know metahumans. Iron Fist would be metahuman because of the fist. Luke Cage, even though it's through an experiment that, gave him his abilities, he's still a metahuman. Daredevil, accident, metahuman. Jessica Jones, accident, metahuman. So, was he just a natural metahuman, or was it something else? It raises questions. It does, that really aren't answered, but you really don't need it. All you need to know is, yeah, he's just good at what he does, and ever since he was a kid, he's just honed it further and further as an adult. I also want to say that this season really made you both love and hate Fisk a lot. Like, you love hating him, but for all the monstrous things he's doing, and he is doing some sociopathic level crap. Like, he is showing just how much of a monster he is. But whenever it comes down to Vanessa, the minute Vanessa comes into the picture, like legitimately, when you see him see her and you see them interact, you're like, no, you can see that despite everything he does, all the horrific things he does, he loves this woman. This woman is everything to him. And the fact is, when he lets her in, you see that on her face too. That she's not a kind woman either. Really, when you break it down, she's probably a bit more social. She could probably be a lot. She's probably a lot easier going than he is in some regard. She's probably a lot less monstrous in some regard, but at the same time, she's the one who orders the hit on the guy who. Wait, who? She's the one who ordered the hit on someone, and it's just like you can see that fist. It's like, oh, this is the woman I want. It's like you can tell right there. He's like, oh, I must have you right now. So when they're getting married, you can see just like these are who they are, and they accept and they love each other. When you see them dancing at their wedding, it really does. You can just see it's just that brief moment of happiness you can see between them. Just like, yeah, like it's not. You can see just two people who love each other dancing, and I'm like, as sick as he is as a human being, it is rather sweet to be seeing this side of him. But then the Nadeem thing came up, and it's like, oh crap. And you know what? I was waiting for a line at the end of the season where, when they're back at Foggy's, his family, like butcher shop, I was thinking Matt might say something like, for what's worth, I believed him when he looked at Vanessa and believed what when he looked at Vanessa and said this was the happiest day of his life. I believed him. Because you look at it, it's like you just see a man that will do everything he can for this woman. I love that line too. It's like, no, we're talking about prison. No, but then I found love, and I was about to. Love is the perfect prison. So these are a minor necessity to protect her. I'm like, yeah. I mean, when you think about love motions, those are the perfect prison. If you really want to get technical about it. What I will say, admittedly, and I actually heard about the episode about Karen's backstory, and I'll fully admit, when I started watching, I'm like, okay, I don't care about her backstory. I actually don't care about her backstory. Because here's the thing, we get enough about who she kind of is throughout season 1 and 2, and she briefly says that people think she killed her brother before we get to this episode about her backstory. And I'm watching like, I get it. She made mistakes. I don't care. Like I'm like watching this one episode. I'm like, I just kind of want to get to the continuation of the actual story. And I kind of like looked at it. I'm like, okay, so this is where we pick up. Okay, I honestly fast forward through that. I just like, I don't care about this. So if that were a glaring flaw in this season, that would be a glaring flaw. Like that episode really didn't need to exist. At least not that most of that part. You could have, I don't know. Well, done something else with it. Who knows? I'll also say it develops. I personally had a love-hate relationship. Not in the same way to Fisk, where you love to hate him. I started to gain a bit of a love-hate relationship with Foggy, and to some extent Karen. Not so much Karen, because I get it. She's guilt-ridden. But there is a degree of love-hate, because they keep getting involved where they frankly shouldn't be getting involved. Less so Foggy, but Foggy I had a different problem with. Let's talk about Karen first. Karen kept getting involved where she really shouldn't be, because she felt like she had an idea, and the idea just doesn't work. She tries to basically get Fisk to act out, especially when she tells him that she killed, Wesley. When she killed Wesley, you're like, girl, you were lucky he didn't snap you in half right there. Because, let's be honest, at that point, she would have been able to get away with it. But she keeps getting involved where she kind of should be. And eventually she's tried to get out and she just can't. But she keeps kind of getting dragged in, and or dragging herself in. is, failing in some regard. Foggy, I had a different problem with, and that is, ultimately, we know Foggy is right, that Matt shouldn't kill Fisk. We do know that. The problem is, Foggy was coming at it, at least from my perspective, with too much of a wide-eyed enthusiasm. And it's like, look, we can do this. We're just going to make a plan. Okay, what do we do? Okay, well, we work together, and they'll figure it out. It's like, yeah, and then I'm like, Foggy, look, that's great, but you need a plan. Look, I'm sorry, Foggy. Like Foggy wants to trust the system, and ultimately the system works, but only thanks to Nadeem basically suicide by cop, basically, and setting up the message. That's the only reason it worked. Otherwise, the system failed. Let's be honest, the system failed. If it wasn't for that little bit of Nadeem pulling something out of his ass at the last moment. Yeah, otherwise it failed. The system failed. And Foggy just couldn't seem to understand that while he was right that Matt shouldn't kill Fisk, he also didn't seem to grasp how powerful Fisk really was. And honestly, Matt. I don't think Matt was 100% wrong in some regard. That there are, in the concept that there are some people that are too big that the law just can't contain, and in some regard he's right, because the only reason Fisk got contained was through some clever play on their part. Ultimately, they got Fisk, but it was through some clever play and some luck, pretty much. So ultimately, yeah, that it bothered me with Foggy that, yeah, I get it, and Foggy is right, but he didn't seem to grasp the necessary steps that we need. Like he was so gung ho about working with, like, getting Matt back to the right side of things. So gung ho about it, but it ultimately he wasn't thinking all the steps through. He was like at step 1, 2, and then wanted to get all the way to the finish line. Like he didn't plan it out as well as he could have, and that was kind of bugging me about Foggy. At the same time, though, I'm not arguing with I love the character of Foggy. Foggy's great, but if I'm going to be honest, that did annoy me a little bit. Otherwise, the action sequences are great. The storytelling is great. The little bits of humor that do get spliced in still gives you that little levity that you need in this series. Punisher has, all of these series have that. Some of it works, some of it not so much, but that's here or there. Ultimately, though, I would rank it probably the weakest season of Daredevil, but that's saying a lot. That's actually saying a lot, and saying hardly anything, given how good the series overall is. So yeah, Daredevil season 3. I mean, I might be the only schmuck in the world who hadn't watched it yet. But if you hadn't watched it, I highly recommend you watch it. I will say, though, it pisses me off that it's the final season we'll ever get of this series. Probably. Never say never. With, Marvel having Hulu and all that stuff, anything's possible. Like the Netflix rights may eventually lapse or something like that. But the way the season ended, I'm like, oh, I wanted a season 4. Oh, well. We got what we got, and I'm glad we got it. So that's my thoughts on that. Honestly, I got a Luke Cage season 2, Iron Fist season 2, Punisher season 2 to review, and I only have Jessica Jones season 3 left to watch. I'm actually holding off on Jessica Jones season 3 for the time being. I might spend some time watching some other things on Netflix, just to, there's actually a creature feature on Netflix I want to watch called Sweethearts, so that's one I may have to catch. I'll probably catch up. And I have seen Old Guard. I was going to do a review of it, but I just never got around to it. Here's my quick, make it to 20-minute mark. I really liked Old Guard. If it were in theaters, I would have thought it was an okay, decent little movie. If that is a Netflix movie, it's a freaking great Netflix movie. Everyone's great in it. The effects work is pretty good for the regeneration capabilities. The story is cool, and I would really like to see a sequel. I'd like to see where the sequel goes with this story. So that's my quick thoughts on Old Guard. And the action sequences are bomb. They were great. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit that bell if you want notifications. I just who would win Star Wars Super Magic. What if anything new in the channel? Put that in the comments below. Let me know to that at some point. ideas for reviews. But that in the comments below as well. I'll get to that at some point, hopefully. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.